Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm giving you eyeliner. If you guys know, my little high school signature was like the eyeliner. I used to do like the Amy Winehouse eyeliner because I'm just an Amy stan. Not the point. So we are here to talk about mental health. No, we seriously are. So I was watching a video from some Fox commentator who was like, here's what he says. Here was the tagline. He's like, everyone is mentally unhealthy. What something's wrong. The kids are mentally unhealthy. Everything's not like it was when I was growing up. Duh, sir. Everything has changed. And then social media has allowed us to get a view into anyone's life at any point in time, whereas before we weren't able to do that. That's a pretty fucking huge change. Everything is different. Except the social issues of the time actually haven't changed. They haven't gotten better, and they actually haven't really gotten worse. They haven't really changed. See, what we've done is just produce more people who have kind of like bad culture. There's no way that you could honestly sit here and talk about the kids being the only people who are mentally unhealthy when there are Karens. Like, let's just unpack what happened with Barbecue Becky for a second. She was at Lake Merritt, which is like a really token hot spot for black people to come and aggregate. So she takes her white ass to the lake, and then she like calls the police on people who are barbecuing by the lake. That's like something that everyone does like every weekend all the time. In her white brain though, she was like, this is acceptable. Or remember the other Karen who like literally called the police on a black man who was bird watching, and he was like a professional bird watcher at a national bird park. Those people though, they're not mentally unhealthy. Nothing's wrong with them. I took a lot away from that Radcliffe Institute video, and the woman who was recognized, I think her name is Cheryl or something. I would highly recommend some of you go and watch that video if you're kind of like, she makes a couple of comments. She says like, Freddie Gray, yes, he was murdered, yes, it was awful, but he was also functionally illiterate. That is a really big problem among black males in this society. Black males are, well, most people in the country, honestly. So when I was studying poverty, literacy was like my thing. So one thing I learned is most people in America right now are reading at a 7th grade reading level. Most people. This is fucking adults. Like, technically, when you're like 20, when you graduate from college, you should be reading at what, 12, 13, 14, 15, like it's kind of grade 16, right? It's like the university level, or at least 12th grade. 12th grade is that you graduated from high school. So these are people with high school diplomas, but they're reading at a 7th grade reading level. And it's because all these things around like matriculation, basically, where teachers are just passing students who aren't at grade level. They don't know, they didn't fulfill any of the SLOs, the standard learning objectives, or the curriculum. Like, they didn't learn anything that year, but they don't want to keep them in the classroom because they need to occupy the seat, or maybe the student was like a public disturbance or whatever. So for whatever reason, that student is not actually grasping the concepts that were taught that year, and they're moving on to the next grade. So in their parents' eyes, the student is doing okay. And it's especially hard if the student is coming from a family who's also illiterate, or like not a college graduate or something, because the parents can't even advocate for the student, and they aren't like doing the homework with the student. So like nobody really ever figures out what's going on. And then you like multiply that because like some of these kids go on to like San Francisco State, and everybody graduates from there, and everybody thinks that they're smart. And we know like San Francisco State is like an awful school. Like all the state schools are kind of awful schools. So graduating from there doesn't really mean much. It's like taking English 1A at community college. That's like what the equivalent of a San Francisco State degree is. Anyway, so let's go back though, because this guy and quite a lot of conservatives are basically pointing at everyone being mentally unhealthy. Now, as a person who's gotten quite a lot of therapy and has been able to unpack quite a lot of stuff, I want to say this. Mental health is kind of like physical health. Like, I've said this in the last video, but like the average size in the US is a 16. That is called morbidly obese because we have like these scales and stuff that you can use to determine like your body mass index, because like the human body, according to like height and age, you're only supposed to weigh a certain amount. That's why they make you take physical education courses in your primary education, like K through 12 or whatever. They make you do it so you have like at least a base understanding of what it means to do a physical activity every day to maintain your physical health. For some reason, people are thinking about mental health in other ways. Like they think like only certain people are dealing with mental health, and they assume that people who are like mentally unhealthy are in some category like all the way over there, and they themselves are perfectly mentally healthy. Well, that's obviously not true. Here's a thing that you can think about, and one way that you might be able to think about it. If you read the news and you saw 12 or whatever, 20 people be murdered, including a whole bunch of children, and then you have, young people in your life, and you were traumatized from the killing, like it seems like everyone is. That's all they're talking about on Twitter. Everyone's making all these YouTube videos. The president's coming out. All these people are now in a state of mental unhealth. They are having to do something called passive trauma. In order for them to get back to a state of health, they need therapy, even though the trauma didn't happen to them. Now, if you've listened to like Joy DeGruy et al., who talks about like post-traumatic slave syndrome, she breaks down how like basically Black people in America, especially like the descendants of slaves, have never gotten any therapy from all of the awful things that happened in slavery, which is very strange because that's pretty fucking traumatic. Even people who've been transported to America from Ukraine, a part of their stimulus package includes psychotherapy. Think about that. So the people who are getting on Fox News and who are talking about the people who committed murder as being as the sole contributor being mental health, they're not telling a full story. Mental health applies to everyone. Like everyone has a state of mental health. Like mental health and physical health are just aspects of kind of like the human experience. But it has been stigmatized in quite a lot of communities where people believe that anyone who gets therapy is like a witch or like a voodoo princess or something, or only the people who get therapy, those are the people with the problem. But everyone else is totally fine. It's like, look at the society in which we live. Does everything look fine to you? No. And these things aren't new. Like, we have degrees like sociology. We have degrees like African American studies. We have degrees like Latino studies. We have majors that are like Muslim studies, okay? Like, the issues of our time come down to like cultural competence because we have so many competing lifestyle beliefs. Like religion comes down to these like ideas about how you should or should not live. And other religions kind of disagree on some aspects of that. This is why after 9/11, so many Christians did not feel comfortable with Muslims coming over, because they have these competing religious ideologies that do not align with our own. Some of it was because they didn't understand the Muslim religion. But other aspects of it really did have to do with like Christianity opposing the Muslim religion. And now a lot of this stuff, like religious ideology, goes way back. I mean, I know it's quite a lot. If you, I don't know, I don't really stay tuned, okay, to all the girls who talk about religious this and religious that, but I do know there's some religions who like basically believe that Jews are the evil of the earth. There's other religions who, go back to Jesus being the start of all good or saving humanity. They're kind of connected in ways, but they go back, okay, to the beginning of human history. And I feel like a lot of kids who are coming up in these like atheist households don't realize how much of cultural traditions are preserved in religion and religious like values, and so they don't understand why certain people are behaving in the way that they are and kind of chastise them for acting differently, and it causes turmoil, right? And so my personal opinion here, like the shooter in this case was like a Latino fast food worker. I've spoken heavily about the issues striking the Latino community. There are maybe we can do a watch along of that Vox documentary. Basically, that points out how in Venezuela, like, the men are like throwing female children in the street to die and killing them. That's happening right now. I mean, if everyone wants to talk about, look at the history of everything, maybe, I'm just saying, if you're like letting immigrants in, maybe you should know that like that's the society from which they've come. So if you're talking about violent criminals or something, this is what happens when capitalism fails and there's no money. People have to resort to like killing. That's what happens. Now, in this particular case, I think that kid probably, it sounded like he was living with his grandmother and his parents weren't around. So he's probably dealing with quite a lot of stress that comes with like abandonment from not having parents, right? Really feels like he needed a father to talk to him about being a man, being an adult, right? Because like 18 is a very, how can I say, it's a very trying year where a lot can happen that can sort of sway you in different directions. You don't know really a lot about yourself. You're trying to like find yourself, and that's that college ends up being that place where you can find yourself. And so it's really sad that kid didn't have the opportunity for whatever reason. Man, I don't see why he didn't. I feel like he probably could have found a college to go to kind of have some personal growth. In his case, it wouldn't have been about the academics so much as it would have been about the social experience. But there's another part to it, and I will say, like, class is just so important, man. Like, sometimes, like, I don't feel like you could actually have a college experience at like a true college experience at somewhere like San Francisco State, just because like most of the people who you're gonna meet are just like you. And that literally takes away the value of the college experience. Whereas in a place like Harvard, even in a place like some of the UCs, really all of the UCs, the universities of California, you're going to meet people from all over the world. And those are like friends that you're going to make. I do think it's very strange too that just so many people grew up in segregated school systems. So like they've just never had any white friends, any Asian friends, they've never had friends outside of their own racial group. And so that's why they behave and they're socialized in all these weird ways. And everyone's just kind of like, this is fucking strange. Like, how do you not, like, why do you act like this? You know? And then there's other parts. Like, I remember this weird part about, like, OSA where, like, all the kids thought that, like, every single thing that was black was ghetto. So, like, Bow Wow was ghetto. Like, all the hoop earrings and shit. Every single thing that was black was ghetto. None of it was, like, culture or, like, hip-hop or, like, cool. They just ghettoized it. Because there were the people at the time. Maybe I'll make another video about this. I will. Ooh, I'm going to save it. Okay. So, let's go back for a second, though. Everyone has their own place in the mental health spectrum. Everyone. Because, like, I talked extensively about the feelings wheel. Everyone's experiencing their own feeling about whatever's going on in their life at a particular point in time. And it's different for everyone. I don't experience things the same way that you experience them. And I feel like it's so unfortunate because so many people don't have access to therapy, so they've never got to, like, explore their own feelings about things that they've gone through in a safe space, which is unfortunate. But I think I've just come to realize people just aren't going to get therapy, so they're just going to be living in a state of unhealth forever. But for those of you who, do care and would like to grow, and honestly, maybe just think about the social issues that were impacting that kid. Because there were social issues, right? Like, I don't know if he had meaningful relationships with other people. Did he? Did he have friends? Did he have, clubs or groups did he have, like, interests, hobbies, a purpose, a schedule, something? A family besides his grandmother? Because also grandmothers are old. Like, people are making all the jokes about, like, Joe Biden, because he's a fucking grandpa, okay? Like, old people, haven't you guys grown, like, I grew up with old people. They can tell you stories and shit, but they can't, like, do things. And also their stories are, like, really outdated. They're just old. So, like, they don't understand any of the shit that's going on in current society. So, like, if you don't have friends to actually bounce ideas off of and, like, talk to about current shit that's happening, like all the things on TikTok, that's another thing too. I feel like all the content creators, people are actually out here creating shit. We have, like, interests and, like, lived experiences and, like, hobbies and shit. Everyone else, though, is just, like, consuming the content. That's not a bad thing, because, like, there's producers and consumers. But I think it does get unhealthy when people are just consuming only, like, one type of content in one place with one experience, and then they're thinking, like, this is going to help me understand the world. It's like the people who only watch Fox News. It's like, well, that's not going to be useful to understand the society in which we live, because it's only one perspective. That is the issue with Fox News. It's just one perspective. In order for you to understand the society in which we live, you have to listen to opposing points of view. You don't have to agree with them. It doesn't have to, like, change anything about how you feel or what you believe. But some of you, like, aren't even listening. So, like, you don't even know the way that other people feel. So you can't even logically talk about it. That's a problem. That's a huge problem in the Black community. Which is why I do feel like I really appreciate and I feel like we needed Candace Owens' voice. I don't agree with everything she says. I don't agree with everything she stands for. I do agree with her having her own perspective about all issues, and it just doesn't conform to, like, anyone else's. It's like, this is what she believes based on her own lived experiences, based on her own values. There are people who agree with her, and there are people who disagree with her. And that's actually how adult life is for everyone. You're going to agree with some people, and you're just not going to agree with others, and that's how it is. You're never going to find some place where everyone loves you and everyone agrees. It's never going to happen, ever.